Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Glenn Fox, and we will begin our study of the cardiovascular, respiratory, and urinary block with a playlist devoted to the heart. We'll start this playlist, however, with an introduction to the cardiovascular system. It is my pleasure to guide you through these systems. In this video, we'll outline the components of the cardiovascular system and their roles and how they function: the blood, the heart, the vasculature, and as a bonus, lymphatics. So the cardiovascular system has many individual constituents that function together to move blood throughout your body. There is the heart, which is an ever-working pump which drives circulation. There's the vasculature, which are comprised of all of the vessels to transport the blood. The arteries that carry blood away from the heart that go into successively smaller arterioles, the capillaries where exchange happens, the venules that pick up blood from the capillaries, and the veins that return the blood to the heart. Blood is a very interesting tissue. It is one of the few liquid connective tissues, lymph being the other. Blood is in a constant state of exchange with interstitial fluid. So if we look over here, we can see that the contents of the blood, so there are formed elements and plasma, can be exchanged with the interstitial fluid that surrounds metabolically active cells. And so nutrients will leave the cardiovascular system to be delivered to the cells. Hormones can be delivered to the cells. And waste products can be picked up by the blood and redistributed to other organs, such as the kidneys or the lungs, for removing those materials from the body. Any excess interstitial fluid that isn't reabsorbed by the blood gets transported by the lymphatic system. Lymphatics is kind of a bonus. It's a crossover portion of the cardiovascular system. It works very intimately with the cardiovascular system for fluid return and for some of the shared elements of the formed elements, such as the lymphocytes, T cells and B cells. But it also has a wholly separate function for immunity. And so sometimes we consider it part of the cardiovascular system. Sometimes we consider its own separate system. So let's begin with blood. Here is an illustration of what one might see visualizing a sample of blood through light microscopy. Blood is the vehicle that is distributed by the heart and the vasculature, and it has three major functions: transportation, moving stuff around the body, delivering nutrients, hormones, picking up waste products, and delivering them to the appropriate system for final disposition. There's also regulation, so being able to maintain certain characteristics of itself, such as a very narrow pH, 7.35 to 7.45, which is physiologically neutral, is very important for the blood. And finally, protection. Blood has a means of protecting the cardiovascular system, so forming a clot whenever there is a discontinuity in the vasculature. It also is a part-time host to the immune system, which protects the organism as a whole. The two major constituents of blood are the plasma, so that's the fluid component, as well as any of the substances dissolved in the fluid, like proteins and electrolytes, and then the formed elements. So formed elements are cells and their derivatives. In this case, blood cells like red blood cells, white blood cells, as well as cellular components such as platelets. The heart is the necessary pump that moves blood throughout the body. It is an ever-working pump. It sits in the middle mediastinum of the thoracic cavity. It is comprised largely of cardiac muscle tissue as well as connective tissues. And because it never stops working from before the day that you were born until the day you die, unless you are so generous as to donate your heart, it relies heavily upon aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, so is when we employ quite a bit of mitochondria to help with that furthering of glucose catabolism and other catabolic pathways, where we make a ton of ATP for power and contraction. And as a consequence of this, cardiac muscle tissue has quite a high density of mitochondria. Vasculature. Vasculature are just the vessel pathways through which blood is pumped and distributed throughout the body. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. As we move successively closer to metabolically active tissues, those arteries narrow into arterioles. Arterioles feed into capillary beds. It's there that we have the exchange of nutrients and waste products between the cardiovascular system and the interstitial fluid which surrounds metabolically active tissues. From capillary beds, venules pick up the blood, and venules are going to be tributaries into major veins, which deliver blood back to the heart. So, arteries carry blood away from the heart, veins carry blood toward the heart. And then finally, lymphatics. Lymphatics in the context of the cardiovascular system are all about reclamation of fluid. They pick up that excess filtrate at the level of the interstitial fluid that the capillaries do not reabsorb, and they deliver it back to venous circulation in the thorax. There are also primary and secondary lymphatic organs that both complement the cardiovascular system as well as provide a whole host of functions for the immune system, and that is why oftentimes lymphatics are considered a separate system. So while they are an important part of fluid balance for the cardiovascular system, they are also working independently for innate and acquired immunity, as we'll discuss. So let's test our knowledge that we have just discussed. Which fluid connects the functions of the blood and lymphatic fluids? Blood plasma? Nope. Filtrate? Nope, that's within the kidneys. Interstitial fluid? Yes. That is the one. Lymph? No. So C, interstitial fluid, is the correct answer. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to discussing the heart with you in the remainder of this playlist. Thank you.